Hey guys, what's going on? It is Strimtom here, and today I want to talk to you about the cool build that I have recently been playing. And by recently, I mean I started playing this build like a week ago, maybe about a week and a half ago, and I got this character to cap and I'm having a lot of fun, and it is Sorcerer. I'm playing as a Dragonborn Sorcerer, focusing on Ice Magic, because honestly, Ice Magic, in my opinion, is some of the coolest types of spells. I like the shattering effect when monsters die, and it's very, very satisfying to watch things just kind of freeze and then explode when you hit them with all of your magic. I very much enjoyed the experience of leveling, especially as a sorcerer with some of the newer spells that were changed. A lot of the lower level spells feel a lot more consistent and fun, like Snowball Swarm feeling a lot better, being an AoE spell that now does actual damage instead of no damage, so the leveling experience was actually really enjoyable. I played as a Dragonborn because I really wanted to maximize my output when going toward the endgame, and I will say it did not disappoint. While at the early stages, it was sometimes okay to use the Dragon Breath, I found that the Dragon Breath definitely didn't hold up when you got towards the endgame, but at least in the early game, it had a little bit of legs to stand on when it comes to actually being sort of good. I didn't find the actual limitation of being a cold spec to be too big of a deal. I often tended to take acid spells in conjunction with my cold spells just to make sure my character was nice and good. I liked using Acid Blast as well. I found that spell was just really too powerful for what it was doing. It just does a lot of damage, great AoE, and honestly, if you want to try leveling as a sorcerer, I would highly recommend going as Acid and Fire for the most part, since pretty much no monsters will actually be able to resist you for the entirety of the leveling process. You'll be able to just slam Fireball into Acid Blast into Fireball into Acid Blast, and beat pretty much every single quest in the game. Sure, there might be some monsters that are completely immune to fire damage, or are completely immune to acid damage, but then they're not going to be immune to both, and you can kind of get away with whatever you want. So this character was an absolute dream to level. I really enjoyed how fast it was to move, the increased casting speed from playing as a sorcerer. I just had a lot of fun. And then it transitioned fairly well into the end game, because this character happened to get a lot of different scaling effects. For those of you that don't know how the spells have been changed in the past few patches, most of the sorcerer spells, wizard spells, got an update so that the base damage is actually increased based on the level of the spell. So a second level spell like Snowball Swarm or Scorch will now do a d6 plus 2 damage per level, as opposed to whatever it was that they did before. Fireball and Lightning Bolt and Acid Blast, instead of doing a d6 per level, they now a d6 plus 3 per level, which is nearly doubling the base output of the spell, and it gets even more powerful as you go up. This means that once you get some early area of effect spells, you really start clearing out those packs pretty fast, and it's really fun to play. Another benefit of playing as a sorcerer is you get really high use magic device, so I was able to use wands pretty much whenever I needed to during the leveling process, which I really enjoyed. It's why I wasn't really concerned about the actual race that I was playing too much. I find that while I'm playing as a wizard, I generally want to consider going as a warforged, since they don't have as easy access to wands, but this character I could just put some points in the Eldritch Knight tree to grab wand and scroll mastery, and then be able to right away get myself some great self-healing or healing of my allies. Again, when it comes to the cold spells, I try to avoid quests in the early game that happen to feature a lot of undead monsters and just focus on the ones that didn't feature a lot of undead monsters. As you can see, quests like Three Barrel Cove, they were great experience points for me, lots of grouped up monsters, so I could kind of just spam Snowball Swarms and never really have to worry about actually running into monsters that would be immune to my magic. Sure, this boss right here does happen to have a 50% resistance to my spells because he has a fire shield on, which was surprisingly uncommon. It still didn't really matter that much because you've just got so much mana that your throughput ends up knocking down all the monsters. Now for the early game and leveling, I didn't really take any meta magic feats because I found that I didn't really need them. You just keep casting spells and eventually everything will die. But when you get to the end game, you really don't need them. So if you find that you might want to take some meta magic feats early just for maybe getting maximized and using spell-like abilities, you can, but I never found that necessary. I found that the new spells were fairly well balanced. Now when we actually transfer into the end game, I found it performed really well. It was very fun to play, it did a very high amount of damage, and I actually was able to get my DCs high enough on freezes, hold monster, to be able to actually stop monsters from moving. It was an absolute joy to play. Just being able to walk into a group of monsters, go click, mass hold, and watch every single monster in the entire group just freeze in place. And if they didn't freeze in place, then I could hit them with a burst of Glacial Wrath to continue to freeze them. The damage was very good, with some of my icebergs hitting upwards of 45,000 damage. I wanted to get even more damage, but I didn't end up fully gearing the character. I had originally intended to take this character all the way, max it out, get a whole bunch of additional Reaper points, but I didn't end up doing that because I need to make sure I'm ready for the new Inquisitor tree and Tiefling tree that is coming out soon, or Tiefling race. Then I want to be able to swap into some of that stuff. But once I got to Endgame, man, Epic was the fastest leveling experience I have ever done in my life. This character is so strong. You run around in Exalted Angel, you get great self-healing, awesome mobility from some of your mobility effects. It's just really, really awesome. Being able to leap of faith all over the place and not really worry about how fast or how soon you need to get somewhere, or getting out of danger really quickly, as well as having just fantastic damage for dealing with single targets thanks to Iceberg and Polar Ray. You can really go through quests very quickly. It does fall off a little bit once you get to some of the higher Reaper difficulties, because I find that Reaper mode reduces the amount of damage that you deal by a larger margin, and so your mana pool isn't quite as useful, but that's where your additional effects, such as your Wail of the Banshee, Finger of Death, Mass Hold Monster, really come into play. Crowd control is something you can definitely do on a Sorcerer, so as you see before, you were actually doing a Reaper 5 Fire on Thunder Peaks, and in this raid I had no issues with getting my DCs to land, whether it's Finger of Death or Wail of the Banshee. Now, one thing I actually decided to do with this character is throw on Mass Frog into my build. Mass Frog is extremely useful for any type of sorcerer, and especially once you get into the endgame. There's going to be some monsters out there like Undead and Constructs that are difficult to deal with when you're playing around with a sorcerer like I have, but they have really low fortitude saves, so you can Mass Frog them and get rid of them as long as you just happen to have a Wisdom item that you can either swap in or use. So yeah, I really enjoyed the experience. I think you'll like it too. It performed to my expectations, and if I wasn't really excited to play Tiefling and Inquisitor in 2 or 3 weeks from now, I would definitely be continuing playing. Anyway, that's pretty much all I got for the gameplay aspect. I'm going to describe the build that I'm doing and kind of the choices that I made in here in just a second, so you'll see me in just a moment. One of the most important things about playing a sorcerer is making a character that looks really, really good, which is why I kind of got my cosmetics games on point, so I want to talk about that first. We're going to go through kind of some of the items I'm wearing. I'm playing as an ice sorcerer, and as you can tell, I definitely got ice going on. I got the ice robe, I got an ice sickle right in front of your face, I got an ice crown, and then of course I have an ice cloak coming behind the, this is all the Festival stuff. It's really cool. And you could have gotten all this stuff during Festival, so if you're looking for this cosmetic set, you'll have to wait until next year when you'll be able to buy the Festival cosmetic set again. But one thing that's really interesting about playing a sorcerer like this that I want to make sure all you guys understand is that if you're like me and you spent about 3,000 DDO points on these cosmetics, what ends up happening is you actually enter an elemental form, which makes you look like that. And it makes your cosmetics kind of not very good, so you can't actually like look at what your character is supposed to look like. It's kind of disappointing. But without further ado, let's start talking a little bit more about how the character is built, other than just my regrets about buying lots of cosmetics for this character. My most important thing about this character is getting lots of charisma. Charisma is really, really strong for a character like this. Obviously, you want to get your DCs as high as possible, so you want to get everything that will work towards doing that. When I look at the skills that I went with, concentration was obviously a big focus, spellcraft was a big focus, use magic device, balance, and of course haggle. I like putting points into haggle because it reduces the cost of stuff. Pro tip, if you happen to like haggle as much as I do, cast yourself a greater heroism, throw on your barter 22 or haggle 22 of insightful haggle 11, get 102 haggle so you can buy stuff for less than half the price, which is pretty awesome. Big pro tip right there. When it comes to feats, I took a whole bunch of different feats leveling up. The only metamagic feat I actually took was Quicken. I find that metamagic feats aren't really that important on sorcerers, but I did take a lot of spellcasting feats. So I didn't take Augment Summoning, I have that from an item. Greater Spell Focus and Greater Spell Focus for enchantment. I took Spell Focus Evocation, Spell Penetration, and Greater Spell Penetration to actually make sure I could penetrate stuff with my spells, if that makes a lot of sense. And then on top of those feats, I also happen to grab Toughness, because I think Toughness is really good. And then, where are we? Past life feats? Yeah, past lives. For some of the heroic past lives, I took both Completionist and Arcane Initiate. I wanted to get the +1 to all spell DCs from Arcane Initiate. I wanted to get the +2 to all ability scores from Completionist. If you don't have those things, you can sub in for extra spell focus evocation from Greater Spell Focus, and you can potentially even sub in maybe Mental Toughness, something like that to go along. For my epic feats, they're pretty self-explanatory. I started with Wellspring of Power. Then I made sure to take Burst of Glacial Wrath so I could freeze guys. These are both pretty good. Emboldened Spell, just increasing the DCs of all your spells by 2. This feat is very confusing, but what it does is it gives you 140 maximum spell points and makes things cost 10 additional spell points. You could almost think that by taking this feat, you get to embolden 14 spells for free because the extra spell points offsets the cost of embolden. So if you cast less than 14 mass holds in a quest, then it's just plus 2 DCs for free from a feat, which is kind of cool. So I like using emboldened spell a lot. It's very useful in that regard. I also have to take Mass Frog, which might sound weird, but my wisdom's actually 49. Mass Frog is very, very useful. It's difficult to get going on most monsters in the game, but monsters that have really low fortitude saves that are susceptible to Mass Frog, like the Scarecrows in Babala Saga, or the Shadow Totems in Babala Saga, or the animated armors from the Curse of Strahd. Very, very good feat to take. I highly recommend it. For my legendary feat, I took Scion of the Feywild, but once you get yourself fully geared, you'll probably want to swap into Scion of the Plane of Fire for the additional critical hit damage. As far as spells, I'm playing as a cold sorcerer, so my spells, I kind of started with some of the early leveling spells using Nyax Cold Ray, Snowball Swarm, Frost Lance, just the good leveling spells, and then I kind of swapped them out for utility when I got higher level, using all the basic stuff: jump, blur, displacement, haste. I like knock. Invisibility is usually pretty rad. It can do stuff in different types of quests. And then for my main damage spells, we got Aluk's Freezing Sphere for my AoE, as well as Cone of Cold. We have Polar Ray for the single target, and then Iceberg for the single target. So you get a lot of options for your actual damage, and you have a decent amount of utility, whether it's Mass Hold Monster, Bale of the Banshee, Finger of Death, Sphere of Dancing. I really like Prismatic Spray. I found it's just too useful against monsters that you just can't deal with any other way. Undead are really annoying, especially in higher difficulties. Same things with constructs, so just Prismatic Spray them and they disappear, and you don't have to think about it. So I really like a lot of those spells. When we break down the enhancements, I kind of focus most of my points in Water Savant, Eldritch Knight, and Dragonborn. Now, this Dragonborn tree is definitely a little bit pumped up. There's a lot more things in here than you probably need. You could easily shave some points out of this tree. I just took everything in here because I had the extra points and I wanted to make sure I got as much health as possible. So I picked up all the health. I got +3 of the DCs of breath attacks. You actually don't use your Dragon Breath, even though you can. It's the worst thing in the entire game. Don't ever use this. It scales 50% with spell power, so my breath does about 400 damage. Autoluke's Freezing Sphere does about 4,000 damage, so the damage is 10 times more by just casting a spell. Always cast spells, don't use the breath. But you need the breath to be able to pick up extra cast levels from Draconic Knowledge White, and you need the breath, or you need to take Power and Breath to at least get +3 to Evocation DCs, which is really, really good. The maximum cast level thing comes into play because Water Savant also adds plus to maximum cast levels from the cores, allowing you to cast very, very high level spells, as well as being in elemental form for more caster level, so it's really useful. I don't like to take the spell-like abilities because, as I said, I like using the higher level spells. The spells now scale harder the higher level they are, so Nyax doesn't really go very far at level 30. Frostlance doesn't scale at all, so once you hit level 20, you pretty much stop using Frostlance in its entirety, and you just swap onto the main spells that you have right now. So these are effectively useless. You might notice I actually take Pierce Cold Resistance, and that's because one of the major key functions with the Water Elemental form is that you can penetrate immunity or resistances by casting a cold spell on a monster. If you hit a monster with a cold spell that's resistant or immune to your spells, they suddenly become vulnerable. That sounds awesome. And you get Awakened Elemental Weakness, where if you're running up to a monster, you can suddenly reduce its resistance or immunity to 0, allowing you to deal damage, and they take 15% more. Except, it doesn't always work. I can't exactly explain why, because I don't know why, but some monsters, it doesn't matter if you penetrate their resistances, they just resist you anyway. This can be very problematic, and as a result, I take Pierce Cold Resistance as well. It is expensive, so you kind of have to limit what you take in other places in the tree, but the nice thing about it is that it actually does work. So this one will at least penetrate 15 of the enemy cold resistances, wherein the Awakened Elemental Weakness doesn't. So far, I haven't had a monster that doesn't stop being immune. Immune monsters do become vulnerable, but anything with resistances like Slads, as an example, Abishai as another example, they all have resistances to cold. This will help you with the penetration, whereas your Capstone won't. I do take Improved Quicken because I think the Meta Magic Quicken's pretty good, and I kind of avoid some of this other stuff because I don't have any other Meta Magic feats. And then finally, Eldritch Knight. I like the cores because it gives you health and makes universal spell power each. This gives you health. Magical resistance rating is just good. And then I picked up the improved stuff, just trying to pick up what I can. One of the nice things about getting Subtle Force is it actually gives you Deflect Arrows. And Deflect Arrows is super useful. It just comes in handy all the time. If you really wanted to, you could actually use heavy armor with a character like this by just throwing on there, because you got minus 35% spell spell failure chance. So there's some pretty cool stuff you could do with that. I just personally don't do that. To move on to epic destinies, my character actually plays in Exalted Angel. This is kind of my setup. I want to get as much charisma as possible. I want to make sure I'm picking up Endless Faith for a little bit of mana. I have Soundburst. I don't really use it that often. I take Piercing Spellcraft, Leap of Faith because it's just awesome to move around, and then finally Reborn in the Light. As a sorcerer, you have plenty of mana, and you'll often be just throwing off healing spells on different allies. So I've got Rejuvenation Cocoon and Cure Moderate Wounds, and it's kind of cool when you can just pop back up in the middle of combat if you do end up dying, which is really nice. As for my twists, I like to twist White Dragon Spell Knowledge to get initial +3 to caster levels and maximum caster levels. With all of my caster level bonuses from the Dragonborn tree, the Water Savant tree, and this tree, it brings me up to 30 on my maximum cast level for all of these awesome ice spells. So Iceberg, instead of casting level 20, it casts level 30, which is a 50% damage increase just on this spell, not including spell power. That's super, super good. I twist in Precise Evocation and Enchantment Specialist for the extra spell casting, and I twist in Rejuvenation Cocoon because Rejuvenation Cocoon is just freaking awesome. If I had more points, and if you have more fate points, I would recommend twisting in Empyrean Magic from Divine Crusader, which is one of the reasons why you notice I take the first level spell Firebolt. You can just pop a Firebolt every once in a while to give yourself an extra 10% critical strike chance. Now, you might be wondering, okay, cool, Strimtom, I gotcha. You got all these stats. You got charisma here. You got a lot of charisma out of your enhancement tree. Look at all this passive charisma you got going on. Where is it? Passive charisma. But how do you get your charisma that high at 94? That seems a little crazy. It is a little crazy. We're going to go through the gear and what makes my character work. I don't have everything perfect. If you want to see the ideal gear, there will be a link in the description to a thread where I will have all the ideal gear, but most of it's pretty good. Only a couple of things I need to swap. Get the Legendary Spinneret. It's one of the best items in the game. Every spellcaster wants to use it because it gives you Quality Spell Focus Mastery 2, which is just too useful. I'm using the Legendary Braces of the Fallen Hero for the Insightful Constitution 9, as well as the Quality Physical Sheltering bonus. It's very, very powerful. Now, this character actually uses the Mantle of Escher. Most spellcasters will want to use the Barovian Noble's Regalia because it gives you 10% exceptional critical hit chance with your spells. However, if you use the new Wave Staff that I don't have yet because it costs Schism Shards, I'll talk about that in a sec, it kind of supersedes that other robe. So instead we use this one, which gives you the Profane Well-Rounded for an extra 2 to all your Charisma, as well as the Ghostly Death Block and Physical Sheltering. It's a pretty good item. For my eyeballs, I'm actually wearing the Legendary Dragon Eyes because it's an item that gives you quality charisma, so it's not too bad. My helmet, I'm using the Unbreakable Stormreach Guardian's helm for a couple reasons. Constitution 19 is really good, Vitality 67 is really good, and I managed to pull one with +2 Reaper bonus to all abilities. So that's an extra +2 on all my stats. Not too bad. For a necklace, I'm currently using the Kindred Pendant because it gives Enchantment Focus, Insightful Enchantment Focus, and Charisma, and I needed a Charisma item. I crafted a trinket in this slot. I'm planning on probably using this trinket even into the endgame. It gives Healing Amp, Insightful Physical Sheltering, and then Sheltering, kind of shoring up my defensive stats. I'm currently using Mysterious Cloak. Don't want to use that in the final build. I got the Thrumming Spark Cord, obviously, because it gives you Glaciation that stacks with your current spell power. It's Enhancement bonus, whereas a regular item is equipment bonus, so you get those extra statistics. You'll also see I've got Augment slotted here, Topaz of Greater Enchantment, or a Topaz of Greater Evocation. These different gemstones actually give you an extra +2 on your DC, so make sure you don't forget to use that. To get all the wisdom that I have right here, I am using the Legendary Chieftain as an interim. I plan on using a different ring later, but having it on my bar so you can swap in a Legendary Chieftain, throw out that Mass Frog, and then swap back is a pretty good idea. My gloves, I have to use these set bonus gloves, and I do have a Globe of Imperial Blood in there, and then I have Boots, the Soft Soul Slippers, to give myself that Insightful 9 Charisma as an interim item. Same thing for my weapons. I'm currently using the Legendary Wild Frost Sickle. It's pretty good. It gives Glaciation, Insightful Glaciation. It's just a good item to use when I don't have anything else to get all my spell power up. And then, of course, the Night Mother's Scepter. This thing is just great for when you don't know what to put on your character. Spell Focus Mastery, Insightful Spell Focus Mastery, Spell Pen, Insightful Spell Pen. Just a fantastic item. The filigrees are really where it comes into its own. I decided to go with a split set where I'm using the Frozen Wanderer as a 3-piece, and Otto's Irrevocable Power as a 4-piece, and then I plan on getting another filigree for +2 Charisma down the line. But you'll see my filigrees are pretty filled out. charisma here, getting an extra 2 points. I like the Frozen Wanderer because it grants me from the 3-piece set 5% cold spell crit as well as 10 magical resistance rating, which is pretty good. And then the Auto's Irrevocable set gives me more mana and 2 spell DCs. The last slot, of course, gives me an extra 2 points of charisma. So my weapon gives me an insane amount of DCs and charisma. It's very, very useful to use, so I highly recommend looking into that. The items that I'm actually missing on this build that I'd still want to get it to fill out, just to start, I want to replace the cloak with the mountain climbing cloak. I can't remember what it is. The one from the new raid, Killing Time, that grants 9 insightful charisma, as well as 10 spell point cost reduction, and some spell, what do you call it? The spell focus mastery. So I think it's 7 spell focus mastery. And it basically gives half the stuff the Night Mother Scepter does, spell focus mastery and the spell pen, which is kind of good, and as well as giving insightful charisma. So I'd put that on my cloak. Then I would replace one of my rings with the Ring of Clouded Dreams, also from Killing Time, that gives Insightful Spell Focus Mastery 4, which is very, very powerful. Then I want to get, again out of Killing Time, there is in fact a necklace, which is the, it's not the Anthem necklace. Anyway, it's some necklace, and it basically just gives 20 charisma, so that way I can replace this with that 20 charisma, giving me that extra 1 point. And since I've got all those extra stats covered, my boots only give me Insightful Charisma, which would then be taken over by my cloak, so I would get a pair of Legendary Green Steel boots that would give me additional critical strike multiplier with my cold spells. And as I said, one of the most important things about a character like this is I want to make sure I have pretty much every single thing I can to up my damage, which is exactly why I'm going to pull up an item here. The endgame item that I want to use for this character, DDO Wiki. Thank you, DDO Wiki, for covering my entire page. The last item that I would want to go with is this item here, the Reflection of Wave. I want this item because it gives Crash of the Wave, so when you cast spells, this is a quarterstaff. It can freeze enemies in a block of ice, which is just good. Lots of spell power, and then Greater Water Elemental Form to give an extra 50 exceptional cold spell power, and 20 exceptional cold spell lore, and 5 additional maximum cast level. This brings my maximum cast level from level from 30 to 35, which is really, really good. Super powerful. That's pretty much an extra, what is that, 16% more damage on all my spells, as well as 20% exceptional cold spell lore. So right now, I'm sitting at a 59%. If I happen to have this staff, that would bring you up to 79% crit chance, or yeah, right here, 79% cold spell critical chance, which is not too bad. It would increase my spell power up over 1,000, and then I could, as I said, get the boots that give me 35% critical multiplier, swap into the Scion of the Plane of Fire for the extra 25% critical multiplier, and have 60% extra crit multi with an 80% crit chance. That's pretty good. So that's the kind of character that I was planning on building. I'm probably not going to get there. I'm going to reincarnate. I was going to go for it, but ever since the announcement of the awesome new stuff coming down the pipeline from Sandstone Games, like the Tieflings, like the Inquisitive, I want to play those, so I'm not going to actually fully gear out this character, but if this build intrigues you, I will have a link in the description for all of the items that you want to go get. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you're having a super awesome day, and I will catch you later when you play this build, because it's really good. Don't forget, your cosmetics don't matter. Oh man, the cosmetics don't matter. Why did I do this?